I grew up, you know, I was the generation that grew up after the Great Generation, and my dad and all his brothers, every adult had been in World War II. So they taught, you know, some, you know how people are, some are more open than others, but I was very aware they had all been in World War II. So when the Vietnam War came along, I was the right age, and that was the only war we had. So I joined the Army in May of 1967 as a private. And 4 or 5 months later was in the infantry in Fort Ord, and I got orders to go to Korea. And I really, that's not what, I didn't join the Army to go train in, and I didn't like real cold weather. So I found out about the warrant officer pilot program, so I went down and volunteered for that. And 2 weeks later, I was in Fort Walters, Texas, going through flight training. So I did that for about a year, and graduated in September '68 from flight school. And 2 weeks later, I was in Vietnam as a warrant officer helicopter pilot. And I had the good or bad fortune to get assigned to the Air Cavalry, so I spent the next year in an Air Cavalry troop, moving around trying to fight the war as best we could.
What was Vietnam like when you first got there?
Well, it was 1968 and '69 is when I was there. Those are the two bloodiest years of war. 1968 was also an election year, so we had, you know, a vacillating political situation, and the enemy were taking advantage of that. That's why it was the bloodiest year of the war, in my opinion. But we saw quite a bit of action up on the Cambodian border. You know, the Ho Chi Minh Trail came down, and so we were. Actually, when I first got there in October, it was relatively quiet, as wars go, because of the victories we'd had during the Tet Offensive. We killed so many of the Viet Cong during the Tet Offensive that it really was a pretty, or relative, more so than I expected. But by the 1st of November, things were getting hot. During the election cycle, we stopped the bombing. We signaled to the North Vietnamese that we weren't going into North Vietnam, and so they sent what they had in North Vietnam south. And so by January the 5th of '69, we were fighting multiple regiments at the same time. So it was some pretty hot battles by then, and it was pretty bloody through the spring of '69. And we moved down to Dong Tam. I was living in, that was our base of operations. We were getting shelled around the clock, day and night. Sometimes it started out only getting shelled at night, and then we started getting shelled in the daytime. And by March, they hit our ammo dump, blew up 1 million pounds of explosives. So it was real war.
What was your first taste of combat like?
My first combat was, the first 2 times I got shot at was by friendlies, and that was from the South Vietnamese Army. The first real day of combat, though, I was a co-pilot in a Cobra, and we went out on the first mission. We went out on the first mission, and we caught we only saw a squad of North Vietnamese, so we attacked them and killed 9 of them. They shot at us some, but we didn't take a hit on that one. We came back, rearmed, refueled. The next time we went out, we caught a platoon. I mean, it's just back to back. You would think with a Gatling gun, we'd have killed a platoon, but we only got 1. They shot at us some, and they got away. It was just like they just disappeared in the jungle. And then we came back, rearmed, ate some sea rations, refueled, went back out. And the next time we went out, I was flying with a guy named Jim Newman from Alabama, and Mississippi, I'm sorry. And he said, "This is going to be boring this afternoon." And so we were out over the Michelin rubber plantation escorting a convoy. So everything was quiet until the front vehicle in the convoy blew up, and all of a sudden they started taking fire from the tree line, and then the back vehicle blew up. So the convoy was pinned on the road, and so we turned and went into the enemy who were firing from the tree line, and did what we could to push them back. But the enemy, instead of retreating, advanced, and within, gosh, 20 minutes, half hour, they were in hand grenade range of the convoy, who was stalled. And so we were diving down along the tree line, on the shrubs next to the convoy, and within another 30 minutes we shot everything we had on the helicopter except for the 40 millimeter, and that was my job in the front of the helicopter. So the commander on the ground, you could hear the crackle, when they call you, and they can hear the crackle of the small arms, you can hear explosions, and he was asking that we fire the 40 and walk it right down about 50 meters off from the convoy. And I'd never fired one in my life. We weren't trained on that weapon. I had no practice time, but here, it's what you had to do. So we go back up, set up, and we come in for that run. And during the we were rolling out so low on our rocket runs that we were flying through our own bursts, so we were flying that close. And I left out this part, and on one of those a bullet came through the cockpit right in front of me and went side to side, and so there's a lot of emotion. We're killing people, they're trying to kill us, and it was pretty tense. So anyway, on the last run, the next to last run, they said shoot the 40. So we rolled in, and I'm looking at an optical sight, and I start shooting the 40, and I start out at about what I think is 100 meters, and I move it into 50 meters. A few tracers are coming up, a lot of stuff's going on, and it fired 9 rounds, slow cyclic, and jammed. Well, it turned out it was bore sighted wrong. So the first round hit about 50 meters off from the convoy, and the last round blew up in the ditch beside the convoy. If the gun hadn't jammed, I'd have walked it across the U.S. convoy. So then we went back up. We had another half dozen rockets. We came back in, shot those, and we're out of bullets. So I had called for help, and so we had another heavy gun team coming out. But in the first day of combat, I killed some people. Had a bullet go through the cockpit, could have killed me. I almost killed some Americans. So I was a shook up boy by the end of that first day of combat.
Did you take part in the Tet Offensive?
No, well, yes and no. The Tet Offensive that everybody talks about was Tet of '68. That happened while I was still in flight school. And the guys who fought in Tet of '68 were the guys who taught me how to fly and fight and stay alive. And Tet of '69 is when they blew up the ammo dump. We were getting shelled around the clock, and it was pretty vicious, but not like Tet of '68. I missed that one, but I was in the '69 one. That same guy, Jim Newman, and I were flying night hunter missions. I flew slicks mostly, but I always flew as his co-pilot. We just became friends, so I was flying with him. And on, I don't know, sometime in that February-March time frame, he and I caught I don't know if you'd call it a convoy, but sampans coming out of Cambodia. And we blew up, sank something north of 20 sampans that night. 2 of them were secondary explosions, and the rest were just destroyed, we think. It's in the dark, so we're working under, we didn't have night vision goggles back then, but it was stuff, there was stuff being infiltrated, midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning out of Cambodia, and shooting that same 40 millimeter. By that time I'd gotten pretty good with it. We between Jim's rockets and my 40, we sank a bunch of sampans, and two of them blew up in huge explosions. In Vietnam, the little group I was in was as tight as any family has ever been. And on my last day there, I said goodbye, and I just felt like I was leaving. I should stay, but anyway, I got a helicopter. I got a guy who was going on a mission. I said, I want to fly myself to Long Bend from where I was, and just add that into your mission, and I'll fly us over there. And so we flew to Long Bend, which is where I had to go to out process and get on the big airplane. And as we were landing on the pad out on the Long Bend perimeter, the last radio call I heard in Vietnam was Mayday, 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 I'm going down. And I just felt like I needed to go, help with that. But it was time, and the other guy was there. So I got out and I said, go get them, cowboy. So that was my last day in Vietnam.
So what happened to your best friend you flew with?
He got shot in the neck. I had two best friends. Jim got shot in the neck, recovered. They got the bullet out. It was traumatic, but relatively light. And my other best friend, I watched my other best friend go down in flames. That was Elmore Jordan. And Jim Newman and Elmore and I had a running joke, that if any of us ever saw we weren't going to survive, we'd throw our wallet out. The other two guys could have the money and, have some kind of party, a wake or something. And just kind of silly, but it kind of broke the tension. We'd be talking and say, gosh, I got in a rough spot today. It's so bad I always threw my wallet out, that sort of thing. So one evening, I was getting ready to, we were going on a night hunter, I think. And Elmore and I were both flying slicks, but Elmore was flying one, and he took off ahead of me to go do something. I don't know what he was doing. And so we were getting ready, and so I got in the helicopter. And when I got in the helicopter, first thing you do is master electric, hit those switches. As soon as you do, got your helmet on, the radios come to life. And the first thing I heard was, I'm on fire. And it was Elmore. And Elmore said, I'm on fire, I'm turning around, I'm heading back. So I look, and there comes Elmore way off in the distance, and flame, smoke and flames coming out. And said, there was a couple of situations there. See that Life magazine over there? There's one of our door gunners in that issue. That was a piece of propaganda put out by them on Memorial Day of 1969. Anyway, I'm deviating here, but anyway, Elmore went in to pick up a wounded guy. I was on the ground, and I told him, I said, Elmore, let's wait and get some guns over there. It's dangerous going by yourself. Nah, I can get him. I'm on, and then I'll bounce back over to where y'all are. Anyway, he goes in, picks up the wounded guy, and as he's taking off, takes a burst of fire, and his door gunner shot behind his chicken plate. The bullet goes through his lungs, and the guy he was picking up was hit again, and Elmore took around through the transmission. So his transmission oil and everything's going down, and blood is everywhere. I've never seen so much blood inside of a helicopter in my life. And so winds just whip everything around, and both of them were, I don't know what it is when you're whatever, they were bleeding a lot. So I told Elmore, I said, put it down, Elmore, and he wouldn't do it. He wouldn't do it precautionary, but he made it back over to where we were, and both guys died. But I only say that to illustrate that Elmore was reluctant to do a precautionary landing. So on this night, he's on fire, and he calls, I'm on fire, I'm trying to make it back. Well, we had firefighting equipment on the runway. So he's coming, and I can see the flames and the smoke and everything. And then he says, the flames are so thick. Next call was both gunners are up hugging, trying to get in the cockpit because flames were so bad in the back. I said, Elmore, set it down. We can make it. So the next call was, there goes our hydraulics. We're out of hydraulics. Well, without a hydraulics, landing to a hover is impossible. And so he's got to make a run and land it. So he's coming, and he's almost going to make it. And then the last call was, there goes my engine. And so he goes down below the tree line off the end of the runway. And then what seemed like a second later, this mushroom cloud comes up. I said, damn. First thing I said was, Elmore's throwing his wallet out. And, you know, because I didn't see any way to make it. But so I hollered at my crew and said, you know, let's go. You know, so I pull the trigger, and we start cranking, my blade spinning. And about the time I get up to RPM where I can take off, here comes a Cobra across the berm and a Loach Scout. And the Cobra's ammo bay door is down, and Elmore's sitting on the outside of the ammo bay door hanging on to a wire that holds that seat. Elmore and his co-pilot, they both survived. And behind them was a Loach, and the two door gunners were in that. What happened, that's just one of those miracles, but what happened when they went down, and everybody, they had already jettisoned their doors, and everybody on the crew jumped except Elmore, and none of them got a broken bone. And Elmore hit, and he was addled. The crew chief bounced back up, grabs Elmore, and pulls him out of the helicopter, and it blows up. I mean, it's a miracle. So that was my other best friend. And so Elmore had a lot of close calls, had some with me, but he died he went blind. I don't know if it was Agent Orange or what, but when he was around late 40s or 50, he went blind and died.
What happened with you after Vietnam?
I came back to Hunter, and I became an instructor pilot at Hunter, and I trained people going to Vietnam. And normally I would stay 18 months there and then go back to Vietnam, but I ended up staying close to 2 years, I guess. And yeah, well, you know, between 18 months and 2 years, the war started winding down. So I became a instructor pilot, and then I was a check pilot, and then I was something else. But I flew the whole time. I love that job. I'd still be there if they'd let me stay. So the war was winding down. They offered me an early out. I hadn't finished college, and by that time I was pretty sure, you know, the war was going south, and I didn't have the feeling of I'm gonna win this war and you know, help save the Vietnam from communism. So I was discharged, went to Florida, finished college, and then there's a lot of stuff. But anyway, I ended up coming back up here and going back in the Army Guard as an infantry officer. So I served in the Army Guard for the next, gosh, 18, 20 years as an infantry officer. We were, I could have flown, but I have to drive all the western part of the state. I had family here, so I wanted to stay here. So I served as an infantry officer. And we were practicing for World War III, you know, fighting, you know, it was a mechanized infantry unit. So we were, you know, learning to do air-land battle, as they called it back then, getting ready for the big fight with Russia and the northern plains of Germany, and you know, or in our case, the northern Italian plateau blocking the river valleys. And we'd go to Italy most for a 2-week exercise, most September, October time frame. So that was interesting. And then then 9/11 came. By the time, let's see, I kept moving up. I was a company commander in a battalion, and I became a battalion commander, infantry battalion, and then I ended up commanding a mechanized infantry brigade with armor and tanks. I mean, tanks and infantry and artillery and a lot of stuff. So good unit. Historically went back a long way. The 30th Infantry Brigade. So 9/11 came along, and on 9/11 I was the senior guard officer in the state. Everybody else was out, and so I went to Raleigh, and everybody wrung their hands and read the intel reports, and pretty tense time. But then it calmed down, and my brigade was scheduled for an NTC rotation, National Training Center. So we trained for the next few months, went to the National Training Center and did a rotation there, which I don't know if you're familiar with them, but it's a big deal. You stay out there for about 3 weeks in the desert and fight the best maneuver soldiers there are, the aggressor units out there, and everything's wired, and they know everything you do, everything you say is recorded. But in the third week, we were getting ready to wrap up, and I got a call, and it was FORSCOM commander, 4-star general, wanted me to meet him on a hilltop. So go up to the hilltop, and he said, "We're getting ready to send you to Iraq." And so, everything was about to change. So we were doing full up maneuver, armor, mechanized infantry tactics, and over the next few months, I don't know if it was 4 or 5 months, we converted from a tank brigade to a wheeled infantry brigade. Now I took 1 battalion, so it was a lot of confusion. The war was changing. The war was changing almost faster than we could react to it. So I went to we got mobilized October of 2003. A week after we were mobilized, I was in Iraq doing a recon and riding around, flying around, riding around, talking to people. It seemed like we had won the initial war, but an insurgency was cranking up, and I realized we needed to be light and flexible and so forth. So I came back over here. We resized the unit, took 1 battalion of Bradley infantry fighting vehicles, 1 battery of artillery, and then we took all our infantry as wheeled infantry, and even converted some of the artillery to wheeled infantry. And that's what we trained for. And then we went back as the first invasion was coming out. We were going in, and on the initial move up country, I had 1 soldier killed, and probably, I don't know, I can't remember exactly, but at least 4 that I can think of that were wounded, just getting to where we were going, because they were putting IEDs out on the road. And anyway, we took over an area, the 30th Brigade did, Old Hickory Brigade, and we took over an area the size of Connecticut.
Say that last part again?
We took over, we took control, I say control, we moved into an area that we owned that was the size of Connecticut. It had about 3 towns the size of Wilmington and a bunch of smaller towns, and then we linked up with the police. There was something called the Iraqi National Guard, which is like Army. So I had 2 battalions of Iraqi National Guard, and I had at the time maybe 1,500 police in these various towns that I was now responsible for. We were, and so we divided the area up, but we were spread over a lot of area, and what we had to do was stand up something a little like city governments and assist the police and kill or capture as many of the remaining terrorists as we could find. The issue was that the situation was growing terrorists faster than we could kill them, and it became and it was another election year. It was 2004. So So I had the bad luck to be fighting in 2 election years during my career. Not the best time to fight a war, and because one party, whoever party is out of power, is going to be attacking the other one that's in power and your commander in chief at the same time. So, and I had 200 and some kilometers of Iranian border. I was right up on the Iranian border on the east side of the Sunni Triangle. So I had Kurds, Arabs, I had Sunni and Shia, you know, just a mix of things. So I had to watch this border pretty closely and try to root out the unfaithful, not meaning that religiously, but you know, whoever was not on the rebuilding Iraq side was not on our side. In Vietnam, the enemy had AK-47s. If you saw somebody with an AK-47, you could kill them, and we did kill them to the tune of about 300 or 400 a month, and just from my unit. And we captured a lot of weapons. We had so many AKs scattered around our quarters that I mean, we'd take them and take a bundle of them and take them to Saigon and trade them to the Navy for plywood or, you know, whatever we could get. But in Iraq, everybody had AK-47s. The enemy had AK-47s. The border guards had AK-47s. The Iraqi army had AK-47s. The police had AK-47s, and it's hard to believe, but every house in this country of Iraq is authorized to keep an AK-47 in the house. So just because you saw somebody with an AK-47, you couldn't shoot them. If they were pointing at you, you couldn't shoot them because they'd have weird muscle discipline, you know. The only way you could tell who the enemy was is if they were shooting at you. And that made it a very difficult war compared to Vietnam.
So how much combat did you see in Iraq then?
Far less than Vietnam. There was a roadside bomb went off right ahead of me on the move up. You know, I mean, we got almost no shelling. They had trouble hitting anything. We had a few rockets come in. I mean, I might have been shot at when I was in. I flew in helicopters traveling because we had to do long distances. We saw what somebody thought was muzzle flashes. I didn't think it was, but could have been. But it was from a distance. So I didn't see. I had one instance where I thought I was going to shoot somebody, and that was in a meeting. We had a political meeting that turned into an ethnic meeting and turned into a screaming match, and everybody in the room was armed, and so I had Kurds, Arabs. One of the Arabs had been shot by some of the Kurds, and I had a bunch of mayors and police chiefs, and everybody had a gun, and it got so heated that you could see them reaching for their guns. And so I had a personal security guy stand beside me, and he said, "We got to get you out of here." I said, "I can't leave. I'm in charge." And so at some point I had a QRF, quick reaction force, outside the building. And the sergeant in charge of my QRF was a Lumbee Indian from Lumberton. And he came in the room, and there were 2 or 3 really troublemakers in the group. And he came in the room with the Lumbee war chant. That's what he told me. I don't know what he was doing. But anyway, he picked up an Iraqi under one arm and grabbed another one and drug them out of the meeting. So my QRF, that was to defend us from the outside, came in and was dragging people out. And once we got a few of the troublemakers out, we could communicate and talk. But that was the only time I ever thought I was going to draw my pistol and shoot somebody if I didn't get shot.
How long were you in Iraq for?
A year, roughly. I went over in October, came back, went back in February, came out in January. Let's see, I went over in 2003, came back, went back over in February 2004, came out in January of 2005.
So when did you leave the Army?
Let's see, I about 6 months later. I was selected for the 2-star general, and offered a couple of jobs. But I tell you, I'd been on the road so long. It'd been I was out about a year and a half. I got home a little bit in the early part of that, but then I stayed in Iraq for the better part, well, essentially a year, and I hadn't had I've been, on my 4th wedding anniversary, I'd been apart from my wife for 2 years. So, and I didn't see where I could ever lead troops again. It was a 2-star staff job. Maybe I could have done some good, but I just felt like I owed my family and I was tired of waking up without knowing where I was. So I turned that down, took a discharge in July of 2005.